Hi again, this is Michael Carlin, president of Henry+Horne Wealth Management, joined by David Guston. If you're wondering who David Guston is, you need to listen to part one. Part one of our, we're going all around the business world on how to think about investing in a more comprehensively responsible way. And we couldn't be more fortunate, more grateful, and more lucky to have Dave here with us. Thank you so much for being here again, Dave, and for us diving into
Sure.
part two.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
So let's pick up. And by the way, I love your shirt. I wonder if anyone realizes we're wearing the same stuff. We just recorded this in one big block in 2 bites.
I don't know about you. I have multiple ASU shirts.
You do? I only
Part
have
of the
one
job,
button on. Everything else is the laundry. Innovation in the field of technology. Let's continue along talking about what innovation looks like. And I think that you opened my eyes to this, and that it's not something I didn't know, but it's not something that I'd thought of. And I think it's important. If you look at the size of the big publicly traded technology companies, from assets, revenue, profitability, you're looking at, if just the size of a few big ones, you're looking at the size of what you mentioned, Ireland. And we need to pay attention to that, because the size and scope of these businesses and their ability to influence what's going on in the world around us is something I don't think that people think enough about.
Yeah, just to drive the point home. So if you think about, and I'm in a way particularly interested in the large tech firms, but the size, their economic scope is roughly the size of a vibrant, medium-sized economy, like Ireland. And no slight to my friends in Ireland, and I have many, but I think that the Apples of the world, the Googles, Alphabets of the world, and so on, probably are going to have more of a say in the future that we, as inhabitants of planet Earth, are going to live in than Ireland will have.
Right.
And so what we've failed to recognize, and this is a critique of me and my colleagues here at universities, what we failed to recognize is that therefore these entities need systematic multidisciplinary study around what it is that they are and what they're doing, and not just, so people study the innovation model at Google and the design at Apple, and things like that, but not from an integrated, systematic perspective. And so I think in the history of my own discipline, I'm a political scientist, and political science as a discipline got a huge influx of talent and, frankly, money and importance in the Cold War period, when it turned out that there were a whole lot of languages and a whole lot of places in the country that Americans didn't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
So, Soviet studies, Eastern European studies, all those things sort of popped up, funded by the feds, in some cases by the CIA itself. And that became an important part of how political science developed, with area studies and comparative studies and so forth. Now, I think it's pretty clear, and I don't want to portray these tech firms as analogous to the Soviet Union, to Ronald Reagan's evil empire. But what I do want to say is that they loom as large as anything in the way we are approaching and creating the future that soon to be 9 billion people are going to live in. And they require systematic study and understanding.
It's and when you think about things, how Amazon has changed the way we shop. And by the way, that has been expedited greatly by the COVID virus anyhow, in terms of
I've been isolating as much as the next person, and ordering my boxes with that little smile as much or more than anybody.
And it's just in the questions people ask about things like Amazon, or the kind of questions that people are asking me, at least, about in terms of Apple or Google. No one really asks me questions about Google. Everyone just uses it constantly throughout the day. Netflix is something that people again, the way we consume entertainment, the way we consume search, the way we consume products, the way we are attached to one another in Apple. And the focus is, how much more can these companies earn? What's a reasonable valuation? And there's a way to answer that question, but there isn't a way. I haven't had a good way to answer some of those questions in terms of how are they helping shape our society? How are they helping us evolve, or evolve correctly or incorrectly? And what are they doing to make sure that it's being done right? I just,
Yeah. So, well, a couple thoughts there. One, to connect it to our discussion in the previous half hour about responsible innovation.
Yeah.
There's another similarly minded term that's somewhat current right now called public interest technology.
Mhm.
And it's evolving, led by the Ford Foundation and New America out of Washington, D.C., and a couple of other basically foundations where the money is from high-tech areas like Hewlett and so on.
Right.
And the sort of impetus behind it goes back to the hearings a couple years ago, I guess the Facebook hearings, where you had, the tech companies on one side and members of Congress up in the dais.
Right.
And if you were a techie, you looked and you said, oh my God, those politicians just don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were a political junkie, you looked at it and you said, those pompous tech people just don't understand. And if you're an observer of this like me, you're like, nobody understands.
Right.
That the gap in understanding between these two crucial elements of our society, how it is that we have organized to govern ourselves and how it is that we have organized to make stuff that we want, don't understand each other. And so public interest technology is designed in part to fill that gap, to think about how is it that we train people who know some things about this, but also know some things about values and politics and how political institutions work. And to think about how it is that we can create the educational systems, the processes, the career pathways, the clinical experiences, the job prospects for people who want to make sure that the values that we bring to our innovation serve the public interest. So that's this field of public interest technology.
And it kind of folds into something you said to me once. I find deeply, deeply fascinating. You said to me, code is law.
Yeah, that's not me. That's Lawrence Lessig.
No, but you told me, listen, I don't know who he is. I know who you are.
Yeah.
Code is law and tech companies are writing law.
Yeah. So the code is law is a quote from Lawrence Lessig, I think from his 1999 book or something like that. And that is a mantra among the people, roughly in my field and a lot of people on the tech side too, who think of the way that code specifies the logics that are machines and therefore we live.
Right.
Now, a generation before Lessig, another political scientist, one of the sort of more central figures in what I think of as my intellectual field, a guy named Langdon Winner, said that technology and law are two sides of the same coin. It wasn't an analogy. He wasn't saying technology is like law, but technology and law are two manifestations of the same kind of thing. They're both structures in society. One's material and one is literary, that people make, that guide us, that channel us, that give us an infrastructure through which we pursue the way that we experience and desire the good things in the world. And if we think that we need a certain set of processes and institutions and norms to govern the way we make law, so think legislatures, public participation, a constitution, those kinds of things, why then do we not have the same kinds of democratic aspirations for the technologies that we make, because they both do the same things in the world. And I find that incredibly compelling perspective.
Yeah, it's for me. For me, it was profound. I mean, listen, I guess I can't give you credit for inventing it, but to me, you brought it to my field of consciousness. So I appreciate that, and it definitely is something that pivots where a lot of my some of my inflection points there. But so, all right, I wanted to talk about technology and consumer choice, and how technology evolves. And I want to talk about that, but you have a great way of kind of putting it with regard to choice and a whole beautiful argument around it. Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
So, again, touching on a little bit of what we talked about in the last half hour, when we often talk about technology, we talk about how it evolves, we give it agency in itself, and the real point that I want my students to understand mostly is that there are a whole set of choices embodied in the technologies that we have.
Right.
And sometimes they're our choice where we get to choose as consumers. Sometimes they're our choice when we get to choose politicians who might be making decisions about regulating a particular technology or passing a particular law that pertains to technology. Oftentimes, those choices are so tightly bundled with other things that those choices really become not choices at all. So, again, going back to this instrument, I really don't have a choice about the kind of camera that goes in here, or whether if I want to have the storage capacity in here and this, whether I get a camera or not. It's hard to unbundle this device or decompose it into things that I want. I have to choose the whole device or nothing at all. And then if you think about, gee, how am I going to keep in touch with my parents in New Jersey? The way that my university expects me to be on Facebook to advertise the school, and so on. Even having this is barely a choice. And then my email is with me all the time, and I have to figure out how I govern the relationship between myself and my son, who's got one of these devices on his own, and how do I behave based on what I need to do for work and what he needs to do for school and what he's playing with. And so it becomes, again, this crazy socio-technical network where the idea of choice begins to evaporate into the far-flung reaches of the network. So choice is real, but choice is also highly constrained, particularly from the consumer perspective.
It's interesting because I think people feel the opposite, but now now that you've unpacked it, it makes a whole lot of sense. Hey, by the way, have we mentioned the Arizona State University lately? We
Not since the
should.
last half hour.
We should. We should. We're gonna mention it again, and again and again. And there's so much good work that you guys are doing there at the university. We've been there with clients, and we visited the 3D printing work that you're doing at the School of Engineering, and there's some of our clients are very deeply integrated and involved with the university and projects. And I encourage all of you listening, watching to take a look through the website, and see what they're up to, because you may find something that inspires you. That inspiration, hopefully will lead to something of a greater investment for both yourself, your family, the organization, the school, and really the state. Because when you support Arizona State University, you support the state itself. So, well, that was a commercial. That was a short commercial. Anyway, I think it's great. I think what you guys do is tremendous.
And just let me add, so if I could add just a sentence to that. So I told you that I'm a political scientist by training. The faculty in my school, I have 54 different people on the faculty in my school. We have 40 different PhD disciplines represented among those 54 faculty members, and 6 non-PhD disciplines. And I'm not talking about the difference between chemistry, biochemistry, and biology. I'm talking political science, electrical engineering, food science, regional studies, anthropology, journalism, law, electrical engineering, applied physics, and I guess right now, 5 of my faculty members, so a tenth of my faculty, share their appointments between my school and the School of Engineering that you mentioned. And so we are everywhere in the university. We collaborate in the craziest possible ways. And it's not just, my school is not just people like me who sit and think about this stuff, but we have people who work with engineers very intensely and build some of this stuff too.
So what you're saying is you take the collaborative approach to education in much the same way that you're promoting that businesses do for their own innovation. Ah,
Exactly.
nice. Um, can we do the sci-fi movie part? And listen,
Oh, please.
I'm such a nerd for sci-fi. I can't help it. I can't help it. I just can't help it. And I get suckered into seeing bad sci-fi movies, and it's a whole thing. And if there's a sci-fi movie, it's one of my favorites. I can't help but watch it, even if it's on TBS with commercials. I can't stop. So, and I mean, we get to do sci-fi, but also have kind of like a business perspective on it. This is a double whammy for me. So I want to reflect on it a little bit. You and I had a really interesting conversation that was, we talked a little bit about the Minority Report. And this was not the technology where Tom Cruise was using the computer screens with his, heptatic fingers. That was not it. What we were talking about is, the aspect of the movie is that, the police force were able to predict crimes and stop crimes just before they were about to happen. And they would all kind of, come in on, these little zip lines from helicopters or whatever there was that they were flying, and they'd zoom up right before a passion crime happened, and they'd be able to stop. But there's other stuff around that, David, that is both problematic and something that's important to talk about. And sci-fi is going to help us unlock the key. We'll go through a couple of movies and talk about how those sci-fi futuristic things that couldn't possibly happen and how they're kind of evolving before our eyes and giving us things to think about today.
Yeah. So one of my colleagues, I've got a lot of colleagues, myself included, who are deeply into sci-fi, because we think of it in a way as technology assessment for the masses.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you know what technology assessment is, if you go back to our previous conversation about the automobile and thinking about making choices about the automobile, the process of that kind of choice, that collective understanding of what technology is, what it might be, what implications it might have in the future, we call that technology assessment. And that's what happens in a lot of these fabulous SF movies, sci-fi movies like Minority Report. And one of the cool things about Minority Report, actually, and I didn't know this till recently, was that the vision that underlies Minority Report, the world that they built, where it's not just the precogs and that stuff, but it's the ambient intelligent advertising and that stuff, that came out of a deep academic Hollywood partnership where people did visioning exercises to try to make this world feel like it was a lived, coherent experience for the audience. And it's that kind of thing that in these huge blockbuster movies that Hollywood does actually really well. It creates that world. It engages in world building. And, in now, as we see with, superhero movies and franchises, it engages in world building across platforms and so on. That's kind of like what Apple and Google and those folks are doing too. And we need to be self-conscious of that as we're enjoying those movies, but also think about how it is that the decisions we're making about tech are played out in these world contexts that movies like and sci-fi like Minority Report give us. The other point that is sort of general about SF is that there's this deep interplay between our imagination as expressed in sci-fi, and on the one hand, our feelings about contemporary moral quandaries, whether they're technological or not. And on the other hand, what it is that we want to do in the world technologically. So if you look at Star Trek, okay, not the best sci-fi in the world necessarily, but perhaps the greatest sci-fi world building activity that we've ever had. What's at the core of Star Trek? The core of Star Trek is a moral vision of what the future is. But that moral vision that Gene Roddenberry created, the creator of Star Trek created, reflected the concerns of the late 1960s in the United States. And so there are literally episodes about the Vietnam War, about racial conflict, about hints at very small hints at at broader issues of say gay rights, and that continues through the Star Trek franchise. And being a sci-fi geek myself, I'm now steeped in Star Trek Discovery, and there's now a non-binary character on Discovery. Not to be a spoiler, she was introduced, or they were introduced last week. So sci-fi gives us this imaginative access to moral quandaries of our own period. Right. And it gives us inspiration about how we work that interplay between moral and technical progress toward the future. And I want to dive, if I can, just give you a deep dive backward for a second. About a century ago.
You can do anything you want in sci-fi.
Okay.
Take me on the ride. I am like this. Come on. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take you back to before World War I. There's a chemist. His name is Frederick Soddy. He's probably the best chemist that you've never heard of. And if you have heard of him, good for you. If you've heard of him, you might know that actually even before the turn of the century, he worked with Rutherford in the experiments that Rutherford did when Rutherford was at McGill that elaborated the transmutation of the atom, the change of radioactivity. Rutherford wins the Nobel Prize for that. Soddy was just a graduate student at the time. He did the empirical work, didn't get the prize. Later, he worked with Lord Ramsay, who identified the helium atom as the beta particle that is emitted. And Ramsay wins the Nobel Prize for that. Soddy, junior collaborator, doesn't get recognized. Soddy finally wins his own Nobel Prize, for a theory of the isotopes, 3 Nobel quality pieces of work that he does early in his career. Now, he is a broadly educated person, as many technologists are. This is 3 decades before C.P. Snow writes Two Cultures. He reads a science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. He had actually published, before Wells wrote this novel, Soddy had published lectures that were meant for public consumption on radioactivity. They were called The Interpretation of Radium. And he starts reading H.G. Wells's book, The World Set Free. H.G. Wells dedicates this book to Soddy and Soddy's public discussions about radioactivity, because Soddy would speculate about what public purpose radioactivity could be put to, even though he didn't fully understand it. And Soddy envisioned a whole set of industrial uses, including some nefarious uses. And Wells, in 1914, 1915, publishes this book that is the first portrayal of an atomic bomb. It's not a huge immediately explosive device. It's more of a slow burn. He has biplanes dropping it because he hasn't envisioned monoplanes yet, and that's what they got in the First World War. But it's recognizably an atomic bomb, and it's inspired by the work that Soddy is doing. Soddy internalizes Wells's understanding that people will do anything with science and technology when there are existential crises like global conflicts. And Soddy actually gets put to work in the First World War on wartime science and technology by his native England. And he also looks at, with horror, what Germany does in the First World War with the Faber process and high explosives and stuff that was, also for agriculture. And he turns the rest of his career to trying to figure out how to solve conflicts based on economics and energy, because he thinks that's what the next world conflict is going to be about. It's going to be about economics and energy. And you get this, 20, 30 years later, we end up having an atomic bomb. And where do we think about, how do we attach responsibility to the thing after the bomb, after it was used. A lot of physicists who were involved in it washed their hands of it, said, "Oh my God, what hath we wrought? This is a terrible thing." Great. Could you have had an opportunity to talk about it earlier on, to talk about it in 1915 when Sadi was imagining this? Move to an intermediary period between Sadi's first imaginations and the bomb. 1934, 1935, Leo Szilard, physicist, Hungarian Jewish refugee in England. He had left Germany just when the getting out was good, before the Nuremberg laws in 1933. Has his brainstorm about the chain reaction, which is a crucial insight that leads to the development of the atomic bomb. And it is for him. He says, my God, if the chain reaction is real, then you can liberate incredible amounts of energy incredibly quickly and turn this into a weapon. Guess what Szilard had read when he was having these thoughts?
You know the book that he read.
H.G. Wells' The World Set Free.
Yeah.
Coupled that with his visceral experiential understanding of Nazi Germany, Szilard says to himself, if people get a hold of this, the people who are going to get a hold of this are the Germans, are the Nazis. They have the technical basis to understand it, they have the technical basis to exploit it, and they're preparing for war. I can't let this out. So he does something that is almost unheard of to do in British science at that time. He takes out a patent on his idea. Science is meant to be free and open.
Right.
He takes out a patent on this chain reaction and he assigns it to the British government so it can be kept secret. In the science fiction trope of the Nazis get the bomb and win the war, there is no more real moment than Szilard making that decision. One man, informed by science fiction, thinking about the combination of moral and technical progress.
Which is why we promote everyone watching tremendous amounts of sci-fi. Gosh, there's no better story to link sci-fi, the importance of sci-fi in human evolution than that, I don't think. Gosh, if there is, I'd love to know, because that's amazing. I was going to.
There's another fun one. There's anher fun one.
There
okay?
is it
going back to this?
Okay, yeah.
The story is the original Motorola cell phone. You know, the brick with an antenna attached to it. Okay, what's his name? Martin Cooper at Motorola. The story goes like this: he's wandering around his living room with I think I envision it being a princess phone, you know, the phone that has the long cord to the long cord from the handset to the desk set and a long cord from the desk set to the wall. And he trips over the cord and looks up at his TV and he sees William Shatner's James T. Kirk flipping open his communicator. He says, "Why can't I have one of those?"
Yeah. That
is an origin story for this device, which is now a whole lot more than that original brick with an antenna. This interplay of the imagination that science fiction brings, both with the quandaries that we have contemporarily and with how it is that it drives the visions that people bring to what it is they want to invent and how they should invent it is quite important. If I could just have one teeny weeny little thing too. I know we're probably running out of time, but you mentioned, you mentioned this Center for Nanotechnology and Society that I directed here at ASU for a number of years. That was funded by the National Science Foundation to look at responsible development, societal aspects around nanotechnology. And one of the reasons why they funded it was because of what a colleague of mine calls the fear of nanofear. They were afraid that somebody like Michael Crichton, and what was the name of his novel that dealt with nano? I forget. No, he had. I mean, it was after Jurassic Park, but yeah, same guy. But he wrote I think was it Prey. he wrote a nanotech, a sort of swarm technology network nanotech novel. And they were afraid that that would be made into a movie and it would turn people against nanotech. And you actually look at this stuff and you look at what sci-fi movies, even dystopian ones, do, is they actually inspire kids into the science because first they're excited by it.
Right.
And they get hooked by the science part of it. And they're kids, they don't want to do wrong, so they want to do better. Okay, and they think I can do better than that. And the linkage between, and colleagues of mine have done this, the linkage between the work, even even some dystopian work in sci-fi, and people going into STEM careers, and people thinking constructively about the relationship between sci-fi, between the arts. You talk about STEAM, you talk about STEAM and design and so on. Between the arts and innovation is incredible. It's not, if people in your audience have worries, have fear of new technologies, I want to assure them that they're largely misplaced when they think about sci-fi as a vehicle for communicating and imposing fear.
They do, and they do. In that, they do. There's the whole suite of movies, whether it be certain generation that grew up on Blade Runner, certain generation that grew up on Terminator, the generation, more recently, Ex Machina, all of those things give people a sense of fear and anxiety about AI, what AI means, how AI can be a harm to humanity.
Yep.
And then there's the best AI movie of all time, in my opinion, which will shock most, is Robocop. And the reason why it's Robocop, the reason why is the movie proves, no, the movie really discusses whether or not AI can exist with morality and ethics embedded in it. Can you have it? Because all the other AI movies that are out there that I'd mentioned before, and others, seem to indicate that people should be worried about AI because, oh my goodness, look at what havoc they bring to society, because they don't know whether or not morality and ethics can be programmed into an AI machine.
Right. And I mean, I think your choice of Robocop is a great one.
Yes.
When you talk about AI and SF, you can't get outside of Isaac Asimov and the 3 rules of robotics, where there's a vision of what programmable ethical AI looks like.
Yeah.
But what do you discover? You discover that the flaws are in us.
Yeah.
Okay. That go back to Lessig and code is law. Okay, laws are flawed because the human creators of law are flawed. And we create a structure in which the inexorably logical AI or robot exists, but because we haven't given every eventuality scrutiny, because we can't, through this, what happens in, at least in the movie version of iRobot, okay, the AI takes over the planet because it can figure out how to take care of humans better than we can.
Yeah.
We gave it a rule that said that we were in charge, that it has to, that it can't hurt us. And so what did it do with that? It said, okay, I'll take care of you then.
Yeah.
I'll clear away your decision making, your institutions, and you'll be better off. Okay, so the flaw is in us, and there's a sort of inescapable, I think, dialectic of AI, that if it's like us, we're screwed, and if it's not like us, we've got no idea whether we're screwed or not.
But I think you're saying overall we're going to be okay.
I have, I mean, it's by our own hand one way or another if we're not okay.
Which
but
is
that's
why
to
you
point
want,
out that it's our hand that's behind technology. Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
We did almost everything. There's things that we didn't get to. We'll have to go for a third.
We can do it again.
At some point. And you know what? Yeah, because we still didn't do the algorithmic bias. We still didn't do, and I still would love to do a discussion on pay scales, how to do that responsibly as well. There's a lot there too.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. There's a few things. Number
And
one,
I
what we
got
learned.
50 crazy colleagues who do this stuff too.
Yeah, I know, but I kind of get stuck in my ways. So we met David Guston. So what we learned is that there's no one better in innovation. And as we're thinking about partnerships, as we're thinking about how to process how the companies we invest in, the companies that we create, to do it better, to do it right. Again, ASU is a great organization to talk to partner with. So David's information is going to be a part of the script, the transcript here. So you'll have that. Feel free to click a link, and I'm just going to go ahead and say, Dave, just feel free to email him directly. Just hit him.
Yep.
Just hit him.
No, that's fine.
We're not giving him your Gmail or your cell phone number, but if you want me to, I will. But
The
we
ASU email is just fine.
we again, David, I can't thank you enough for your time, for the knowledge that you imparted on us. It's wisdom, guidance, interpretation, and it's all appreciated very much here. You made us better and more responsible with your time today. So it's a great gift. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And so much of that comes out of dialogue with people. And so I really welcome any kind of dialogue with your listeners. So thank you, Michael.
Well, you say that now. Famous last words. All right. Thank you again so much. If you need anything, you can always find us at hh-wm.com. You probably have my email address, or info@hh-wm.com. Thanks again, David. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Material on this program is intended for general information only and should not be taken as specific investment, tax, or legal advice. None of the information contained in this broadcast is intended by the host to be a solicitation for sale of any security. Further information is available by contacting Henry+Horne Wealth Management. Securities offered through Independent Financial Group, member of FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Wealth Management LLC, DBA Henry+Horne Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor. Henry+Horne Wealth Management and IFG are separate and unrelated entities. Henry+Horne and Henry+Horne Wealth Management are separate entities. Member of FINRA and SIPC.